We begin with the Ottoman Empire, which is a struggling empire that recently just lost all of its African claims. And after a war with Russia sparks the independence of many of its claims. And one of these countries might be considered one of the important countries in history, as this country, named Serbia, is responsible for World War I, which triggered World War II, which triggered the Cold War, and so much more. And that's why we're focusing on it today. Now let us keep these valuable information in our minds while we move up to see the countries of Germany. Germany at this time has the best military in the world, and has an alliance known as the Triple Entente, which has Germany itself, the Austria-Hungarian Kingdom, and Italy. And Germany's rivals soon make their own triple alliance, known as the Triple Alliance, which is Russia, France, and the United Kingdom. Now, the Austro-Hungarian Empire is probably the weakest of all these countries, as its military isn't that strong, its leader is kind of dumb, and it's one of the less technologically advanced, and is one of the only countries, the major countries, that doesn't have any African colonies. So as you would expect, a lot of people don't really like their ruler. So some people that live in Serbia go over, and while the emperor is there on a parade, the Serbian assassinators shoot him. And soon the Austro-Hungarian Empire accuses Serbia of this, which serves them right. But what they do, Serbia definitely does not deserve, as the Austro-Hungarian Empire declares war on Serbia, which is protected by Russia, and the Austro-Hungarian Empire is protected by Germany. So they all just declare war on each other. And Russia is also friends with France, which is friends with Britain. And the First World War has begun. But even though Italy is friends with Austria-Hungary and Germany, they decide to stay neutral. And now Germany does its Schlieffen plan. So they move into Luxembourg and move troops through Belgium to try and get past France's defenses, which is the Maginot Line. And here, some of the most shocking Belgian atrocities are committed. And the Germans quickly, just mow over France as they're more advanced. One example is that the Germans had helmets. And then there was the French, which had no helmets, no protection, no machine guns, no nothing. It's like they were waiting to get killed. The French even still used horses. Though the Germans mowing through France soon came to a halt, as Russia soon was already ready, and they were already pushing into East Prussia and parts of Austria-Hungary. And with no troops there, the Russians easily pushed through with their weird and wacky weapons. What is this? Austria-Hungary then tries to push back the Russians, so they send up some forces. But they then immediately get pushed back, so Germany has to send up some reinforcements. And back on the French front, the Germans are about to take Paris. But then the French stop retreating and start fighting them at the Marne River. And a huge amount of casualties are taken, and the war soon becomes total. And with a new kind of weapon inside the world now, called the machine guns, soldiers now need a lot more protection. So they decide to come up with a plan. Dig trenches. So they dig a bunch of trenches, and throughout the war, this becomes trench warfare. And miles of trenches are dug, all the way from the Alps to Belgium. The French now see that if they want to protect their country, they're going to have to kick the Germans out of their trenches and push them out of France. So France starts pumping up its army by using tons of metals to make tanks and using tons of men, leading to a large loss of life on the French side. Germany now also sees that if they want to invade France, then they're going to have to push the French out of their trenches. Same thing. So the Germans quickly also follow by pumping up their army. Now with trenches all over the place, both sides are now in a stalemate. And, well, it was called World War I for a reason, because it was a global war all over the world. So many of Germany's over-the-seas colonies were soon taken. And then there was Japan, which was trying to become a really big power, which is how it became part of the Axis in World War II. But this is World War I. So Japan, with it being one of the Allies, sent some forces to go destroy the German Asians in Qingdao. And also with the Allies' colonies all over the world, it led to a tragic loss of life all over the world due to all the colonies, with all the men there being forced to go to the European fronts and African fronts. So many continents lost most of their populations like this, such as North America. Italy then also decided to soon join the Allies, and that led to a tragic loss of life yet again in the southern European front, with Italian African colonies then being shipped over to Europe to fight against the Austro-Hungarians in southern Europe. And soon a new Central Power member joined, which was the struggling Empire of the Ottomans. The Ottomans then declared war on Russia, and they tried to start a little invasion in the Caucasus and in Persia, but that didn't go that well because they weren't used to the cold, so many of them froze to death. The Ottomans now wanted to try and invade Egypt, but that didn't go that well. And now the British saw that the Ottomans were now kind of weak, so they went through with their boats to go blow up Constantinople, but saw a bunch of mines there, so they quickly had to retreat the area. And with that, even though they couldn't invade Egypt, it sounded like a good old decent Ottoman victory. And then a British landing then came in Gallipoli, trying to hopefully push back the Ottomans, but to show the Ottomans yet again dominance. The British were soon pushed out of Gallipoli with almost 500,000 British casualties. The British, now seeing that the Ottoman were kind of unstoppable, they soon left and focused on the European front. Also, a new German guy known as Ferdinand von Zeppelin made a Zeppelin, which he used to bomb the British capital of London. And this crazy new aviation tool wasn't just used for bombing. And with this crazy new aviation thing, there was now airplanes, which were kind of a new technology, but they are now used for war. And these things known as dogfights, which kind of a weird name because they're not dogs, they're planes, but okay, it's history, so there's some weird stuff in history, I guess. And now, let's focus on the Balkans, as a new Central Power member is coming, and that is Bulgaria. And with Ottoman and Bulgarian and Austria-Hungarian and German help, they soon annexed Serbia, but most Serbians moved to Albania. So, Austria-Hungary invades Albania and Montenegro. And Romania also declares war on them, so it then gets almost annexed, with basically 97% of its territories taken. Though the the Central Powers fail to invade Greece. This leads to a bloody Balkan front revolving around Greece, with the Central Powers trying to invade Greece, while the British and Italians in Greece try to push up and maybe reclaim Serbia and Albania. Germany also declared war on Portugal, even though it totally didn't have to, which was kind of a mistake, as now Portuguese troops were now arriving in the trenches and in the Balkans with the Balkan campaigns against Austria-Hungary and the Ottoman Empire. And then two of the most brutal battles of the war happened, with the Battle of Verdun. And the French were absolutely being KO'd. And the Germans were making staggering progress. So France got some help from Britain, which then launched its own bloody battle in the Battle of the Somme, which was kind of the same thing as France, as the British were being pushed back a lot, leading to Germany having more casualties, but it was worth it, as they were seeing much more success than than France and Britain. The Allies now wanted to finally kick out one of the Central Power members, so Russia then started a new campaign by pushing troops through the Caucasus and gaining much Turkish territory from the Ottomans. And then the British landed in Kuwait and tried to take the major city of Baghdad. But along the way, some Arabian bandits found them in the city of Kut, and were soon pushed out. And the Central Powers now had the same goal as the Allies. They wanted to get out one of the Allied members, and one of the biggest of which was Russia, so they focused on Russia. And after some bloody battles and creating a Russian famine, Russia surrendered. And Russia basically lost all of its eastern territories. And now Russia was out of the war. With Russia out of the way, Germany now wanted to eliminate the American threat, which was at the whole other side of the world. So they sent a message to Mexico, asking them if they could invade America. But a British ship intercepted the message and showed it to the United States, which was furious. And soon the United States of America joined World War I, and by 1918, troops were being shipped in the millions. Germany now saw it was either now or never. So they started long and brutal coalitions against France. But when the American troops arrived, these extra supplies were soon basically given up for nothing, as almost all their battles were now being lost, and Germany was now getting really hungry, and its civilians were starting mutinies, and it just went downhill and down here from there. And the Central Powers now saw that there might have been a break in the glass where a hammer could go through, and that hammer was being held by the Allies. You like my little thing? Yeah, that was cool. And soon, the Germans were completely pushed out of France and almost pushed out of Belgium. And they even had to give up Luxembourg. And it seemed like it was over, as on all fronts they had been pushed out, and they had been completely pushed out of Africa. And the first one to fall was Bulgaria. And then the Ottoman Empire. And soon Romania was then given back. And now it seemed like the two main Central Power members were about to collapse. And Germany at this point, just to tell you how weak they were, couldn't even hang on to all the Russian territories, so they gave them back to Russia for nothing. And soon Austria-Hungary couldn't hold out anymore and had to surrender. But Germany would not fall so easily, and kept fighting, and kept fighting. But it didn't have any allies, and mass famines in the country were happening, mutinies, and so much more. Until, eventually, Germany was forced to sign peace. And later, just to really emphasize Germany's problem, in the same city which Germany was proclaimed in the city of Versailles, that is where they'd have to sign a treaty, which would give them up all their territories. And that is the German humiliation and the end of World War I.